You know, over lunch, Tony, you were talking to me about the sort of three accounting stages in the water business and what needs to be done in each one of them. And I wonder if you'd share those lunchtime thoughts with our students today.
Well, having had the good experience of finding that you can spot an idea which no one else has spotted before and gain a bit of reputation from it, as well as make a contribution that causes people to think in a better way about something. I'm not an economist, I'm not an accountant, but clearly with accounting for water is something which is very different because people like numbers, they claim they need them, and if you don't have numbers then you don't count. So accounting for water, whether it's in metric meters or in cubic meters or in dollars per cubic meter, if you could get some numbers which everyone agreed were sound and reasonable, then we could make progress. So I spotted that there are three communities make a contribution to accounting for water. There are what we call the water accountants, and they're engineers and scientists who measure volumes of water. So it's metric cubic meters of water. They know they can't have their method is imprecise and not very precise, and therefore the accuracy is not very good. But certainly they can come up with numbers which people would agree are good. But they are all on their own doing their thing. And then we've now, over the past 25, 30 years, we have obviously followed environmental accounting people. They had a hard time getting their position in the economics firmament, but they definitely are there now, and they do something called national capital accounting. And it's not so, the numbers are just as bad as GDP numbers, but nevertheless GDP numbers are accepted as the health.
Influential.
Yeah, certainly influential. And so if you had natural capital accounting, so that at the end of a year you knew how much you'd enhanced or disenhanced your natural capital, including water. And then the big one, which employs millions of people, is the financial accounting side. Now, what I've noticed since I go to meetings that they all exist and they all watch each other and they all watch the food supply chain which they're accounting for, but they don't come together. And so my advisor on this is an economist, and he said, hey, it's a bit like a Venn diagram where you've got the three instead of being overlapping, they're in separate. And no one has spotted that that's exactly what we need to do. We need to get those people to see responsibly that that's, it isn't enough to do the stuff separately. But the other thing about the other three that is important in the market for food, where we've got 92% handled by farmers at the beginning, there are three parts to that. There is the production market, there's the trading, processing, manufacturing, and retailing part of it.
Now you're talking about food now.
Food now, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the consumption end. Now again, people talk about the food supply chain market as if it's all one, but no, it's quite clearly three. The first part is the production part, and that's a failed market in the sense that farmers in Europe get 30% of their income from subsidies, so that's not a market, that's something else, it's a failed market. At the other end, a country like the United States really gives a high priority to the access to affordable food. It comes above access to affordable health in terms of the politics of the United States. So it's really elemental. And 14% of the US, 43 million people, are dependent on subsidized or free food.
The food stamp program.
Yes, the food stamp. So that's another failed market, which, okay, we just get on with that. Government does this and government does the stuff for the farming sector, and therefore the food pricing is all an attempt to make sure that people that might go on the streets have affordable food. And this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say today. When I discovered that virtual water explained things and should be a comfortable explanation, I found that no. The scientists could see it, and many friends could see it, and lots of other people could see it, but if it was a politician you were talking to, No. The important issue, food security, is more important, I judge, than nuclear security. Because people will be on the streets. Obviously, the existential idea of a nuclear catastrophe is there, but it actually can be talked about in public politics. No one talks about food security. It's got to. It's there. There's no risk at all. You can't have people thinking that tomorrow or next week there's not going to be food. So you just can't get the idea of virtual water easily into the political debate, and you can't also get the idea that people are messing around providing cheap food because that's the only way that we can keep the people in this position. So trying to make a contribution in the area that one is doing is very difficult for political reasons.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying here. You're saying that it's too politically difficult for people to know that they're really totally dependent on, or 50% dependent on virtual water. They would feel insecure if they really fully internalized how much of their grain and food supply was coming from abroad.
Yeah. And that's in the early period of sharing the idea in the Middle East, which I did quite easily and found one or two very senior scientists and ex-ministers could see it. It was obvious that the majority of the political process just couldn't take it in. It was too close to we're insecure. So I sometimes get this across by saying it used to be relevant because he was in power. When Mubarak was in power, he couldn't stand up and say, "Do not worry, my people. We've run out of water and therefore we can't feed ourselves, but we can easily import our food." He'd be out of power the next day. So the explanation is powerful, but it's always overwhelmed by the political process.
But Britain is dependent on food imports too, right?
Right. We started it all in the middle of the 19th century when we started to import food from North America and South America. And that caused a lot of trouble at the time because we had 30 years of the Corn Laws from sort of 1815 through to 1840, during which the landed people who were producing the food and the farm labourers who were getting a living to some extent out of producing it didn't want the food imports. But the Liberal Party, come on, free trade. And so we gave in, and from the middle of the 19th century, we import 50% of our food, or sometimes more.
Well, but that meant you had cheap food too.
Cheap, yes,
right?
It was cheap. Yeah.
So it wasn't a hard sell.
No.
But in some ways it seems like what you're saying is there's a trade-off between water security and food security. Is that right? I mean, as people feel more food secure, they're actually more water insecure.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. That's nicely put. Yeah. Yes.